Good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for July the 27th. Today, we are reading together here in 1 Samuel chapter 18, which is going to progress the story of Saul's reign over Israel, and now the one who is going to take over the throne, David. We saw yesterday, actually over the past couple of days, where David was introduced into the story on Tuesday, I believe it was, where he is anointed by Samuel to be the next king over Israel. Chapter 17 sees him take a step into the spotlight of Israel, being the one who is able to take down the Philistine giant champion Goliath. And then here in chapter 18, we're going to see the results of that victory over Goliath and the continued victories that David is going to experience. And we're going to be given insight into why he is able to experience these things and the unfortunate result of Paul's attitude shifting in a very strong way against David. So let's read that together here in 1 Samuel chapter 18, beginning in verse number 1. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse number 1. When David had finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship and loved him as much as he loved himself. Saul kept David with him from that day on and did not let him return to his father's house. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as much as himself. Then Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his military tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. David marched out with the army and was successful in everything Saul sent him to do. Saul put him in command of the fighting men, which pleased all the people and Saul's servants as well. As the troops were coming back, when David was returning from killing the Philistine, the women came out from all the cities of Israel to meet King Saul, singing and dancing with tambourines, with shouts of joy, and with three-stringed instruments. As they danced, the women sang, "Saul has killed his thousands, but David his tens of thousands." Saul was furious and resented this song. "They credited tens of thousands to David," he complained, "but they only credit me with thousands? What more can he have but the kingdom?" So Saul watched David jealously from that day forward. The next day, an evil spirit sent from God came powerfully on Saul, and he began to rave inside the palace. David was playing the lyre as usual, but Saul was holding a spear, and he threw it, thinking, "I'll pin David to the wall." But David got away from him twice. Saul was afraid of David because Yahweh was with David, but had left Saul. Therefore, Saul sent David away from him and made him commander over 1,000 men. David led the troops and continued to be successful in all his activities because Yahweh was with him. When Saul observed that David was very successful, he dreaded him. But Israel and Judah loved David because he was leading their troops. Saul told David, "Here is my oldest daughter, Merab. I'll give her to you as a wife, if you will be a warrior for me and fight Yahweh's battles." But Saul was thinking, "I don't need to raise a hand against him. Let the hand of the Philistines be against him." Then David responded, "Who am I? And what is my family or my father's clan in Israel that I should become the king's son-in-law?" When it was time to give Saul's daughter Merab to David, she was given to Adriel, a Maholathite, as a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and when it was reported to Saul, it pleased him. "I'll give her to him," Saul thought. "She'll be a trap for him, and the hand of the Philistines will be against him." So Saul said to David a second time, "You can now be my son-in-law." Saul then ordered his servants, "Speak to David in private and tell him, 'Look, the king is pleased with you, and all his servants love you. Therefore, you should become the king's son-in-law.'" "I come be part of the family," they're saying. Verse 23, Saul's servants reported these words directly to David, but he replied, "Is it trivial in your sight to become the king's son-in-law? I am a poor commoner." The servants reported back to Saul, These are the words David spoke. Then Saul replied, say this to David. The king desires no other bride price except 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies. Actually, Saul intended to cause David's death at the hand of the Philistines. When the servants reported these terms to David, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. Before the wedding day arrived, David and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines, or 100 Philistines, depending on the manuscripts. The Septuagint version puts 100 there. Regardless, he killed the proper amount of Philistines needed. And he brought their foreskins and presented them as full payment to the king to become his son-in-law. Then Saul gave his daughter Michal to David as his wife. Saul realized that Yahweh was with David, and that his daughter Michal loved him, and he became even more afraid of David. As a result, Saul was David's enemy from then on. Every time the Philistine commanders came out to fight, David was more successful than all of Saul's officers, so his name became well known. And that is 1 Samuel chapter 18. All right, so looking at this chapter, I want to give you really the main theme of this chapter. I want you to trace this with me throughout this text. The main theme of this chapter is Yahweh's favor, and that is up against Saul's malice. This is about Yahweh's favor being against Saul's malice. Which one is greater? The chapter begins with David having just spoken with Saul, having defeated the Philistine giant Goliath. And the text tells us about Jonathan and his relationship that is established with David. I don't think this is something that happened just immediately. This probably seems to be something that developed over time, and it makes sense that Jonathan and David would have been warriors side by side. War makes the strongest brothers. So this makes absolute sense to me that there would be such a strong bond between these two mighty warriors for Yahweh's army. And yet, one of the things, again, that it pits is, here is Jonathan, who is Saul's son, having favor with David, whereas Saul himself, that's not the case at all. David marches out with the army. He's successful in everything that Saul sends him to do, and Saul's cool with that because David's bringing victory for the kingdom. He's really, in some sense, I bet Saul is thinking that David's going to make him look good. That is until the singing and dancing and the songs and the shouting and all this kind of stuff reveals the way the people perceive David. Saul has killed his thousands, pretty good. But this David character, he has killed his tens of thousands. Saul is furious, the text tells us. He's furious. He resents the song. Literally, he's furious. This saying was evil in his sight. How dare they credit him with more than me? Don't they know I'm the king? The only thing this guy hasn't taken from me yet is my kingdom. Yeah. The only thing isn't taken yet is the kingdom. Verse 9 is a key verse in understanding the flow of the story, that Saul watched David jealously from that day forward. The next day, the evil spirit that we see back in chapter 18 is doing its thing again, is tormenting Saul, and he takes a javelin that's in his hand while David is playing the music on the lyre to try to soothe him. And 2 times he tries to kill David with the spear, with the javelin. Why does David keep coming back? Well, I'm sure David my guess is that he just thought this was Saul going through, various spells of insanity, that he would just get really bad and then settle down and things be fine. And again, it's an honor to serve the king in this way. So David just recognizes this kind of the danger that comes with the territory of trying to soothe the king during these spells of insanity. But David doesn't realize the reality that Saul is afraid of David. This is mentioned a couple of times here within the text, that Saul is afraid of David. And we need to note too, within verse 12, also within verse, verse 28. I want to say there's another instance of it saying this as well, but especially within these 2 verses. There we go. It's 12, it's verse 14, and also verse 28, where we are told that Yahweh is with David. Initially, Saul's afraid of David, because Yahweh was with David instead of with Saul. It doesn't tell us that that's something that Saul necessarily understood at that point. It does tell us that explicitly later on in verse number 28. We'll get there. But Yahweh's with David. He's not with Saul. He ends up sending David out, continually sends him out to perform military missions, and David's continually successful. He's successful in everything that he does. And whenever Saul sees that he's successful, he dreads him even more. It makes him even more mad that David is successful as his military commander. He's leading the troops, and he's garnering the hearts of the troops and the hearts of the people. Israel and Judah loved David because he was leading their troops. So Saul says, "Hey, here's my daughter. Go ahead and take her. Be my son-in-law as well as the warrior, and go out and fight the Lord's battles." But he had an ulterior motive. He was thinking, I don't need to raise a hand against him. I'll just let the Philistines be against him. The guy can't live forever. Eventually, he's going to make a mistake, and somebody's going to kill him, and then I'll be rid of him. But David shows his humility. No, I can't do that. Who am I that I would be the king's son-in-law? This oldest daughter, is given to someone else. Well, it ends up that the youngest daughter, or this other daughter, not the youngest, but this other daughter of Saul, Michal, she loves David. And when Saul hears about this, he's like, okay, I'm going to use this to my advantage again. She'll be a trap for him, and the hands of the Philistines will be against him. So again, I'm going to use this to put David in dangerous situations. So he calls David. He's like, hey, come be my son-in-law again. David says, well, you act like it's just easy to become the king's son-in-law. You got to know that the king's daughter is going to drive up the greatest bride price there could be. It's not a trivial thing to pay the bride price for the king's daughter. I'm just a poor commoner. I'm just a normal guy. But Saul says, oh, you're okay. I'll just ask for the bride price to be, I don't know, 100 Philistine foreskins, which of course isn't something that they're just going to give up to David. He's going to have to kill him in order for him to give those over to Saul. It says okay, and I think this is very interesting. Think forward to the David and Bathsheba story. What David does to Uriah in that story is basically what Saul is trying to do to him here. I want to put him in danger, put him in a horrible situation that, again, the odds are in my favor that he should not make it out alive. And yet, he and his men go out. They kill, again, either 200 or 100 Philistines and take their foreskins. It depends on your manuscript that you're reading from. He gives them as a full down payment. And then Saul does give his daughter to David. And verse 28, Saul realized, he saw and knew that Yahweh was with David, and that his daughter loved him, his son loves him. Everyone in Saul's life loves this man. In his mind, he's probably thinking more than they love me. Became even more afraid of David than he was before. So basically, David turns into an enemy. Saul is now an enemy of David. How sad that is. So every time the Philistines would go out to fight, David gained more and more success. He continued to add to his Philistine body count. And all that did was continue to make Saul hate him more and more and more. And how sad it is that this jealousy, this fear on behalf of Saul caused such hostility and drama in his life whenever that simply did not need to be the case. So think about it then. Again, I told you the theme of this story, of this chapter, is really Yahweh's favor versus Saul's malice. Which was stronger? And obviously, is Yahweh's favor. No matter how much Saul hated David, no matter how many difficult positions he put David in, David continued to succeed. Why? Because Yahweh's with him. That's the main point. Yahweh's favor was with him. And because of that, we see within this chapter as well how clearly this chapter shows us that David is superior to Saul. Now, take Yahweh out of the picture altogether, probably still the case. But especially whenever it comes to Yahweh's presence being with David instead of Saul, that's made all the more obvious. Made all the more obvious. The hatred of men. The hatred of men cannot overcome the love and the grace and the favor of God. Let's keep that in mind. No matter who hates us for whatever reasons that they might, if God is with us, if God loves us, if God cares for us, if God's grace and mercy is upon us, then who cares? Think about what's in the New Testament. If God is for us, who can be against us? That's certainly what's something that that David was recognizing here within his life as he was struggling right now in his relationship with Saul. I wonder how much David really perceived in this moment how much Saul hated him. I don't really know. Again, the javelin throws, you might think, well, Nick, obviously he knows he hates him because he threw the javelins at him. But again, that could be attributed just to the temporary insanity that he would go through because of evil spirits. But whether or not he knew it at this moment, here coming up shortly, he's going to know. He's going to know just how much Saul hated him. How sad that is for this relationship that could have been so great to deteriorate so quickly. I appreciate you tuning into this reading on this Thursday. If you have any questions or comments about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. I'll do my best to address those things or have a good conversation with you about them. If you have any questions about anything we talked about the past few days, please feel free to make those comments or ask those questions. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, everyone. I hope you'll join back in again tomorrow as we read together from 1 Samuel chapter 19, where David, again, has some interactions, not very pleasant interactions, with King Saul. We'll read about that then. Take care and God bless.